This is not a story about heroism. It's a story set in Pokrovsk, one of the most violent fronts in Ukraine. But it could also happen at other points along the Ukrainian front line or practically in any modern war. It's about a soldier isolated in a basement trying to survive while watching his comrades fall dead beside him. It's about the way soldiers die. No glory, no soundtrack, no beautiful speech, no name. Just fear, blood, explosions, decisions made in seconds, and a brutal truth that almost no one wants to tell. The Russian attack started badly. One of the soldiers had an explosive land right at his feet. It was almost an instant death, something different from what would still be seen in that series of attacks near Pokrovsk. Those who reached the trench didn't see the Ukrainians because the command had ordered that no soldier leave the bunkers so the drones could operate freely. They were already watching the Russians. The first drone to come down hit between the trees. The fragments flew under the snow, but the invaders were protected by the trench. Obviously, other drones came. The new dives were more accurate and started tearing the soldiers' flesh apart. The impact was so strong that it threw some bodies out of the defensive position. The only survivor hid in one of the empty shelters, but the drones searched for him. The explosions came in through the hole, rupturing their eardrums. The pressure wave compressed his chest. When the force of the explosion ceased, his lungs suddenly expanded, causing rupture of the pulmonary alveoli and massive alveolar hemorrhage. The soldier would suffer acute hypoxia and suffocation from his own blood. Even so, the Ukrainian defender was ordered to leave his cover, go to each of the holes and fire and throw grenades to make sure no Russian was left alive. Some Russian soldiers still managed to reach the village that was their objective. There were many, like the one in the Pokrovsk region. They surrounded a house where the Ukrainians were hiding, but the first of them was shot and fell wounded. He was moaning as he bled. The usual tourniquet wasn't coming. It would solve the problem and he would lose blood there, in the snow. The hemorrhage would cause several complications. With less blood circulating, the heart would have more difficulty maintaining pressure, delivering oxygen to the brain and organs, and distributing heat to the extremities. At the same time, the body would try to defend itself by reducing blood flow in the vessels of the skin, arms, and legs. To preserve blood and heat in the torso, where the heart, lungs, and brain are located. This would help for a while, but it would also make hands, feet, and limbs colder and less oxygenated. If you survived, you could very well lose those parts of your body. The snow absorbed the soldier's heat while his comrades tried to continue the attack. The cold further reduced his chances of survival. Because it interfered with clotting, the body needed to form clots to close the ruptured vessels. But when the body temperature dropped, the clotting enzymes started working less effectively. The platelets didn't work well and the blood took longer to stop. That man wouldn't last much longer. One of his colleagues decided to go upstairs to break into the house. It was a terrible mistake. A burst of gunfire went through his body. Death could have been instant. But the Ukrainians finished the job with a grenade at his feet. The blast wave broke the bones in his legs, and the fragments went up through his body, tearing muscles, arteries, and organs. The survivors hesitated and tried to run away. But the Ukrainian artillery was alert. Cluster munitions exploded around the house. It was enough to take down more of the bears. The last of them still managed to escape, leaving his wounded comrade on the ground. But the drones, always the drones, showed up to put an end to the dangerous suffering. Instead of letting him fight against the cold and the bleeding, the Russian who survived would join others who were gathering in the Pokrovsk region. That's how they did it. Small groups began to gather, just like what happened in Belitsk, north of Pokrovsk. There in that village there was a happy Russian. An anonymous man whose war record would prove more remarkable than his casual video would lead anyone to imagine. He was glad that they were warm in the basement with food. There was soup and they melted snow to get water. The soldiers said they would win, and he had reason to be optimistic. At that moment, Russia was gaining territory in Ukraine, advancing after the capture of Pokrovsk. Many soldiers were already inside Konstantinivka, further east. The advance against Liman was gaining momentum. Donetsk was what mattered. Yes, there were reports of Russian setbacks in Zaporizhia in 2026, and that the Ukrainians were disrupting Russian logistics in the south and toward Crimea. For Moscow's war correspondents, this was concerning and affected military efforts. There were even reports of retreats due to lack of ammunition, but none of that mattered to the Russian soldiers in that basement. The advance continued. The Russian armed forces were still gaining territory in key cities. That was undeniable. The wave of destruction continued. Artillery, airstrikes, and Russian drones persisted. Even on the Kharkiv front, which had been stagnant for over a year, there was some progress. The Russians still persisted in their attacks. Ukrainians were dying, costly losses for the armed forces of Kyiv. They always faced difficulties recruiting and keeping their lines filled with men. The soldier had reasons to stay happy in his basement. According to him, there were even fluffy carpets under his feet. He spoke enthusiastically. Victory will be ours. Everything will work out and be on target, brothers. See you soon. The soldier did not say his name in his videos. That's why he was nicknamed Nesvesny, the unknown. Anonymous like so many others, but even without a name, his story would tell something greater, showing the fate of his friends and helping to answer many questions about how soldiers die.
Follow us and everything will be fine, brothers. See you later.
До скорых встреч.
Many had to die before Nesvesny reached Belitsk and showed his luxurious hideout in the Ukrainian underground. Without rats and still warm, he celebrated. But he arrived on foot where others failed, thanks to the Russian strategy. Russian drones hunted the Ukrainians in the defensive network after Pokrovsk. The explosion was right on top of that group of soldiers. There was little chance to escape. The primary trauma from the shockwave was devastating. The abrupt change in pressure shattered the tissue. The complete rupture of hollow organs, such as lungs, stomach, and intestines, combined with the transfer of energy, could cause disarticulation of limbs and traumatic decapitation. Thermobaric munitions caused immediate carbonization of the airways and both superficial and deep soft tissues. In addition to the combustion of subcutaneous fat, burning the soldier from the inside, the chances that a man could survive all of this were slim, even if he could be rescued. He would die alone and forgotten, where his corpse would rest anonymously. Sometimes this soldier was lucky when miraculously the drone didn't explode on impact. If the device glanced off branches or trees or landed softly in the mud or in the soft snow, the force of the impact might not be enough to trigger the front impact mechanism that completed the firing circuit on a direct perpendicular hit. However, by programming remote activation, mere vibrations, or residual energy, the miracle could be undone. The BM-21 Grad, a 122mm truck-mounted rocket launcher, helped clear the way for Nesvesny. A full salvo of 40 rockets from a single vehicle could devastate an area of up to 40,000 square meters in about 20 seconds. Being hit directly meant death for a Ukrainian soldier. There was no personal protection capable of defending a man from the high-pressure shockwave, combined with the fragmentation of the rocket's own body, which shattered into thousands of steel pieces at extremely high speed, piercing vests, uniforms, helmets, and human flesh throughout the surrounding area. Death still awaited a man who was more than 30 meters from the impact. The projectile's body was internally shaped to generate about 2,400 to 4,000 standardized fragments upon detonation. Within 30 to 50 meters, soldiers could suffer dozens of simultaneous puncture wounds. The high-velocity fragments caused massive arterial lacerations, leading to abrupt blood loss, as well as rupture of the chest cavity and multiple visceral punctures. Even if the soldier was behind light cover capable of stopping some of the shrapnel, there wasn't much to celebrate. The overpressure wave was strong enough to burst eardrums, cause severe pulmonary hemorrhages, and serious brain concussions, incapacitating the soldier immediately. Not to mention the chance of being thrown and having bones broken by the impact. Thus, Nesvesny saw the Ukrainians being eliminated in the tree lines and in the fields, where there was little that could protect them. But inside Belize, Kiev's soldiers took shelter in houses and buildings. The Russians also had a solution for that. Planes like the Su-34 carried heavy gifts sent by the devil for the Ukrainians hidden under the concrete. Fab 1,500 bombs carried about 700 kilo of explosives, while FIB 3,000 bombs carried about 1,400 kilo of explosives. Inside the building, the shockwave collided with walls, ceilings, and concrete floors, ricocheting and compounding. This multiplied the pressure exerted on the bodies, crushing the soldiers from the inside. Those who were on the lower or middle floors were subjected to tons of debris in free fall. The outcome was severe trauma, traumatic amputations, and crush fractures to the chest and skull. For the few survivors, it was overwhelming. It meant stretchers, however, stretchers dismantled. Prolonged compression of the muscles released large amounts of myoglobin and potassium into the bloodstream. As soon as the pressure was relieved, or if blood flow remained poor, these toxins could cause acute kidney failure and cardiac arrest. The instant pulverization of concrete and plaster generated a dense and impenetrable cloud of toxic, high-temperature dust. Trapped or fallen soldiers inhaled this thick mass, suffering spasms in their airways, rapid mechanical suffocation, and internal burns when there were still traces of gases from the explosion. Those who were farther away also weren't spared when the devil's gift was opened. The passage of the shockwave through the skull and the violent displacement of air threw the body against the walls, causing diffuse damage to the brain. The soldiers lost consciousness immediately. They suffered amnesia, severe spatial disorientation, and loss of coordination, making them unable to react or escape. Nesvesny arrived happily at Belitsky. His face was covered in soot from spending days hiding, waiting for other men to arrive to form an assault group. There were few of them, always few, advancing alone until they gathered with Nesvesny in his humble residence. But they took a long time. During that wait, something happened to him, and Nesvesny knew why so many others were taking so long.
Am I feeling bad today? No. He went crazy and...
That's how it was.
Ну вот.
Nesvesny.
the hand, the crap hit, damn it. He went crazy and shh.
The Russians tried to reach Belitsky to join Nesvetlany's group, but their commanders sent them on a long, dangerous trek, often alone. The freezing weather was discouraging for them. Walking was difficult in the freshly fallen snow, and everything got worse when the drone started circling. The Russian raised his AK-74, but that demon attacked at speeds that could exceed dozens of kilometers per hour. He missed all his shots. Then the drone dove, its propellers propelling it at speeds that reached over 100 kilometers per hour, depending on the model. The Russian managed to dodge, ducking down and watching the demon explode behind him. But that miracle was one of the illusions of war. The Russian stood up relieved, walked for a few moments, grateful to be alive. But soon after, his mind clouded and his legs gave out because of another truth about how soldiers died in war. The drone was a machine made to kill. The demon had casings designed to shatter into thousands of fragments or contained preformed steel balls. At a distance of 2 to 5 meters, the shrapnel was still traveling at supersonic speeds. They acted like dozens of high-energy projectiles, hitting the body simultaneously. The fragments could easily pierce the neck, the armpits, and the groin area. The rupture of major arteries such as the femoral, carotid, or brachial could cause hypovolemic shock, which is massive blood loss. The soldier could lose consciousness in less than a minute, and death would occur within a few minutes if a tourniquet or combat dressing was not applied immediately. That man was alone. His blood reddened the snow. He chose the end, knowing that nothing else could save him. That anonymous Russian didn't miss the drone flying around him out of incompetence. Those aerial pests didn't move in a straight line around the soldiers. The pilots performed evasive maneuvers, abrupt changes in altitude, and sharp turns until the very last second. An untrained soldier made mistakes for a simple reason. He tried to shoot at the drone, when in reality he needed to aim ahead of the target, accounting for the change in trajectory, and for the time needed for the ammunition to collide with it. To make matters worse, the standard AK-74 used iron sights designed for human targets on the ground, not for fast-moving drones. When aiming, these sights could cover the device and impair depth perception. The soldier saw death diving toward him. The drone's buzzing caused instant surges of adrenaline and panic. It was a countdown before the fatal dive. The soldier heard the sound grow louder as the drone approached. That life or death pressure, based on a single mechanical hit, caused psychogenic tremors in the hands, which, ironically, further impaired the ability to aim accurately. And that was a war without rest. A World War II soldier could enter a hut in the middle of the field, rest his legs, talk, and make tense jokes about the front. He would hardly be seen and hit by artillery on a mission like that. In Ukraine, there were always eyes in the sky and death on the ground. Only the dead rested. Nesvesny was learning that. The Ukrainians had found him. Grenades fell on his hideout. He reported how an AGS grenade and an offensive grenade were thrown at him. In an open field, the pressure from an explosion would quickly dissipate into the open air. Inside the basement, Nesvesny felt the shockwaves collide against the wall. Besides the damage already reported in this story, air from lacerated lungs could enter the bloodstream. The bubbles could reach the brain or the heart, causing a stroke or almost immediate cardiac arrest. In the hold, the shrapnel didn't just travel in a straight line, but ricocheted off hard surfaces, creating a mechanical blender effect, shredding human flesh. Nesvesny saw the dead around him, the wounded groaning. He suffered head injuries, a lacerated hand, and a torn leg. He still had the humor to say that they had torn his jacket. He survived, but he knew that the Ukrainians were hunting in Belitsk. There were soldiers patrolling the streets. They carried not only grenades, but also anti-tank mines, like the TM-62, which were placed inside the Russian hideouts. It was 7 kilograms of explosives, much more than the 100 grams that Nesvesny had received. The explosion didn't just injure, it turned the entire environment into a press of air, concrete, and metal. The soldier's body could suffer the pressure of immediate anatomical exploration. Bones could break without direct impact just from the violent compression of the air and the shock transmitted by the shrapnel. The temperature at the epicenter of the explosion reached thousands of degrees Celsius in microseconds, causing the instant combustion of clothing, equipment, and body tissues, before the nervous system could even process the stimulus of pain. If he was farther from the epicenter, the soldier's heart could stop due to direct mechanical trauma, and the brain vessels could rupture because of the transfer of energy through the spine and arteries, causing immediate brain death. The soldier, if he still retained any physical integrity after the shockwave, would be buried under dozens of tons of pulverized debris, reinforced concrete, and metal beams, many explosions and shrapnel. That's very much how the soldier died in Ukraine. Many Russians on foot never even encountered a Ukrainian. They died before that, sent successively by their leaders. It was a strategy that had been working. They kept advancing, moving ahead through villages and cities, gathering together, then regrouping for the assaults on the defenses of Kiev. They passed by the bodies of their comrades and finally had the chance to raise their rifles against the Ukrainians. The fighting began, but the drones wouldn't leave them alone. The only Russian who survived the drones then suffered the least likely death of that war. The Ukrainian rifleman pierced his body with 5.56 or 7.62 ammunition. The Russian felt firsthand that the damage caused by a rifle projectile didn't just come from the hole it made, but from the transfer of kinetic energy to living tissue. That energy was so brutal that the tissues expanded beyond their limits, tearing muscles, skin, and organs near the bullet's path. Dense organs like the liver, spleen, and kidneys could suffer severe ruptures even without direct impact. If it hit a long bone, like the femur or the humerus, the projectile could shatter it into fragments that became shrapnel inside the body itself. Extreme pain, nervous collapse, and intense bleeding could incapacitate the soldier immediately and lead to death within minutes without quick medical help. The projectile could shatter inside the body, causing massive lacerations to multiple organs simultaneously, which made surgical treatment extremely complex due to the number of multiple separate bleeding sites. And if that didn't kill the soldier, the drones would be there to finish the job. Nesvesny saw his friends dead in the basement. He bandaged his hand and cared for himself. His face was swollen, the basement was dark. Hope was starting to fade. Then the Ukrainians came back. Rifles fired at the basement. More grenades came down. Nesvesny became just another statistic of the war. Dead to the Ukrainians, missing to the Russians. The video of his last moments was recovered from his body by the soldiers who killed him. There was no name. There were no final messages. Only the hope of somehow staying alive, which would later be shattered by the war. Just like so many other soldiers were. Just like so many others he saw on his way to the basement in Belitsk.
I don't know what all this is for. God willing, I thank him. So that's it.